particular teaching a condensed version of the authorization course for fourth-year graduates. I'm especially pleased with the what's happening here, and my recommendation would be that there's recognition and accreditation of the existing employees, because I have confidence in that as a former employee. I have a question though for Marisa, and that is actually related to the integration of engineering disciplines. And you take, for example, this particular building or any building anywhere. There's a multitude of engineering disciplines who are doing all of the drawings to put a building together to be built. What are the, from the PEO's perspective then, how do you ensure that the integrated package is going to meet the requirements of being safe? Could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for the question. We see more and more today that there's obviously complexity in engineering projects, and they're going to cross-discipline to many different areas. And so your question is, how do you make sure that that's covered off appropriately by the competent and accountable people? And when we license, it's by discipline, but when we get our license, it's up to us to decide what our competency and skill is. And so I think that there's two answers. So one answer is that I've seen, for example, in industry and manufacturing, I've seen people cross-train and expand their skills so that one professional engineer actually has broader scope and can cover multiple disciplines. And then I've also seen that you have to have a team of professional engineers who will review the area that their scope contains, and so you will have a team. You cannot have necessarily one that can cover everything. And so we just need to have good processes in our organizations to be able to properly track that and identify who's responsible for what piece of the project, so that that can be covered off. Realizing that it may be unrealistic to have one overall sort of reviewer with multidisciplinary projects.
Well,
and I see it happen in practice today.
That is the question. The electrical could be perfect, the civil design could be perfect, the mechanical design could be perfect, but does it fit together, and who's signing off on having it all fit together?
And I guess just to close on that would be that the team probably have to talk to each other and share their inputs to make sure that it does fit together, each with their own expertise. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Excellent presentations to you all. Thank you very much. Ted, I'd be interested in your assessment of the 67, I believe it was, scientists that are OPG who are falling in this space. Would they be held by PEO's agreement with the natural scientists to review them, and could they actually fall outside this need to be covered? Would be my first question. And the second question is, in terms of your suggestion of a 2-year phase-in to get this done, are you suggesting that we move the 2014 September 1st deadline to 2016, or is that what you're saying, that 2-year? And do you see any problem with, like, if it was, is there any challenges in moving that deadline back the 2 years?
So to answer the second question first, that's exactly what I meant. Extending it actually to 2016. Yeah. So by 2 years, from 2014 to 2016, not to 2015. Right. So altogether, giving us 3 years. Yeah. The answer to the first question is we did not evaluate this relationship between natural scientists and PEO. We assessed the nature of the work against the requirements of the Professional Engineers Act, and we looked at the definition of professional engineering, and we basically said this kind of work does fall under that definition. So although the person's a physicist doing the work, we're requiring it to be engineering work. Now, if there's an opportunity for us to go back and reevaluate that, I'll take that back. I was not aware that there was an opportunity for us to do that.
I hope it doesn't upset the apple cart. I'm just saying that there is an agreement, and what it is, there's a joint board that reviews those situations. because of the concerns of scientists that they were doing engineering work. So that is a situation PEO faced over the last 2 years. Resolution was found. That would solve a big part of your problem, wouldn't you say?
It very well might. So I'm going to take an action coming out of this meeting to investigate that more fully.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the suggestion.
Sorry, can I go ahead? My question is to Marisa Sterling on the prosecutions. You said we received about 30 complaints. Is that through the normal work that we do at PEO regulation, or they are related to industrial exception? You have any breakdown as to this happening in those places where you don't have the rules in place? You know, we do have rules in place in the rest of Ontario. You have any knowledge of that? I was interested because I've been working on the discipline panels quite a bit, and are we seeing those stats per year? Any correlation to the exception?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ishwar. So the statistics actually are coming from the Ontario government as opposed to PEO's own discipline process. So those 30 prosecutions are ones the government would have done through their legislation of worker injury. So go ahead, sorry.
Okay. So it's not the one that we get it from complaints, which are referred to the discipline committee, and we handle at the panels. Those are very different ones?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Excellent presentation. My name is Desmond Gomes, and I actually had a question for both Fred and Marisa. I work for Husky injection molding systems, and one thing these guys, our engineers are struggling with is not only will PEO provide a thought process that provides technical guidance and some sort of direction, not just following some established rules that we have set up. You have a template and you have a toolkit, but a lot of the engineering aspects that are performed within the manufacturing environment does not neatly form in that toolkit which you have provided. And to interpret that, most of our groups are actually struggling. I don't know if you had some wisdom here, and how did you all tackle some of the problems at OPG as well, and how PEO also could help with some examples which would be very practical in trying to meet the requirements when the time comes and the repeal comes.
Okay, great. So Fred and I are deciding who's going to talk first. I'll open it up, and it'd be great actually to hear a bit about. I know OPG came up with their kind of flow chart of how to figure that out. That might be part of the answer. So yeah, one of the complexities in this kind of a change is that you're bringing awareness of a piece of legislation to an industry that may or may not have really had much involvement with the legislation in the past. And so to be able to interpret it there's a learning curve to interpret any kind of legislation. So one of the challenges is having individuals who are not engineers and therefore would not understand the practice interpreting this. And I draw the parallel to me looking at the Act of the Lawyers recently, and I was trying to say, well, how do you define a lawyer, the practice of law? And it's defined as applying legal principles. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know what that is, so it doesn't get me very far. But I'm not a lawyer, so I guess I shouldn't know. If you look at the definition of engineering, it's the same thing. It's defined as applying engineering principles. And so when you have a layperson without that background trying to decide for their company where and where not they're doing engineering work, it's very difficult because they don't understand, obviously, that. So that's one of the observations that we've learned. So how do we overcome that? Absolutely. Your suggestion is something that we've started to do, which is around trying to provide the examples, trying to provide what you exactly would be doing in the manufacturing industry and where you would delineate. So we started to do that, and I think we'll continue to do more of that. And then maybe I can invite Fred to talk a bit about the flow chart that he tried within his organization.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the question. Thank you, Marisa. As I stated in the presentation, we started off with a guiding principle. And the guiding principle was, if you're creating something new, or if you're modifying something so that it is going beyond what it originally was designed to do, or beyond the design, that would very likely be engineering work. if you're working within an existing construct, whether it's a procedural construct or within an existing design, then that is likely not engineering work. So we started off with that as a guiding principle. And then we looked at every job, and we constructed a flowchart that was very OPG nuclear centric. It reflected the way we do business. But it provided detail to that guiding principle. So if you're in a manufacturing context, and I'm going to go out on a limb here because I don't come from the manufacturing industry, but let's say we have some kind of an assembly line that is producing a product. If there's a modification to that assembly line, we would call that engineering work right off the bat, even if it was a simple modification. If it was a simple repair and replace within the existing design, or if they were replacing with a component that was almost equivalent, we would not call that engineering. But if that equivalent component was not available and they needed to modify the assembly line to put in a new component that performed the same function, but it's a new component, we would call that engineering. So that's an example. Does that answer the question?
It does. I don't know if PEO agrees with that kind of interpretation of engineering.
Absolutely. When I hear it, when I try to take the definition and put it in a simpler format, what I say is you're solving a unique problem, and I did hear that from Fred earlier in terms of identifying the work. So it's a unique problem. It's not textbook. It's not currently documented. It's a unique problem. You solve it in a decisive manner, so you're actually giving direction on the decision. You're not just collecting data and looking at things. You're actually, when you make the decision, is the engineering work, not the testing and collection of information. And the third thing is that there's risk there. We regulate the profession because we're safeguarding the public. So there's got to be an element of risk there to people or the public. And the definition includes people and the environment, for example. So there's has to be evaluation of risk. And if the risk isn't there, or if it's not a unique problem being solved, then that would be the two hurdles to say it's not going to be professional engineering work.
I'm just going to be really quick. So as an example, you give non-engineering work. There is also OSHA sitting on the top of that for workplace health and safety. Those aspects are also covered, what we are saying. Now, I don't know if an accident happens, irrespective when the auditors will come, either from PEO or from OSHA. Do we have a plan of how they would actually investigate the issue? And it's an open-ended question. I'm not going to ask you to answer that, but something for food for thought going forward, that we should have proper plans and contingencies and any gaps that we have, which I haven't seen yet. Kind of worries me that we are going to fly on the seat of our pants, and then when time comes, we won't be prepared. But anyway, thank you.
My name is Gordana Tajanic, and I have kind of two questions, but they are related to each other. First one is for Fred. When you spoke about the licensing for engineers that they graduated outside of Canada, my question is, do you see a reason for those engineers graduated outside of Canada to go through this lengthy process to get a license? Is there a particular reason in your opinion? I know that there is administration among PEO, but just would like to get your opinion about that. And the second question is for PEO representative. Is there any way, or are you going towards the process to make that lengthy process shorter, not so lengthy as it was in last 10 years, because I went myself through that process? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. So if I understand correctly, are you asking for my personal opinion, whether it should be lengthy? Okay, well, first of all, it's PEO's decision who should license. So I don't want to encroach on PEO space. They've decided that they need to follow a certain rigorous process, so I'm reluctant to offer a position that may be contrary to PEO's next door, because I'm not authorized to do so. But when I'm off the stage, I'd be happy to share with you my personal views.
Let me try to just share with you some thoughts. And in some cases, these may be more my own thoughts from my experience as opposed to officially through PEO. But my observation is that we exist now in a global environment, right? We exist in a global economy. We're mobile people, not just across province. I talked about mobility and the fact that we're trying to, there's an overall plan with all regulated professions to have consistency across Canada for intermobility within the country. But we don't just move that way now, we move broader than that. And so when we look at a global perspective, I think your question touches on how do you license professions in a global economy? And I think, personally, I think it's a very interesting question. What exists today are two restraints. One is that constitutionally we regulate professions provincially. So there's no such thing as a national licensing structure. And the second thing is that we have power over standards within the country, and that's it. So we have, for example, a Canadian Accreditation Board, but we don't have a North American or global accreditation board. And I would just offer that, and this may be, people may be already working on this, but in order to address some of the questions that you're asking is speaking to the fact that how do we take regulation into the global economy and the global environment, which means coming up with some sort of global standards, which would be standards of education, standards of accreditation, that sort of thing. So I think those are two of my observations of two of the barriers, the constitutional barrier and the fact that there is only currently a Canadian standard as opposed to a broader standard. And that within that framework, that's why we have, unfortunately, additional hurdles for those who are educated outside of Canada.
If I can just add, in the context of OPG, I'm going to answer your question a little bit differently. For us, because we have a very comprehensive training, qualification, and oversight process, it's very easy for us to hire from anywhere in the world without being too concerned with the specific qualifications of an individual. My answer would be very different if that individual was acting independently entirely on their own, without oversight and without having gone through a known training and qualification program. I would want assurance that if I'm hiring a professional engineer, that if there's a regulatory organization like PEO that is certifying them, I want assurance that they have gone through that rigorous process of ensuring that they meet all the standards. But for OPG, it's much easier for us to hire directly foreign educated graduates without going through that rigorous process, because we've got our own rigorous process for qualification and oversight, ongoing oversight every day. So I think there are two very different scenarios, and they do need to be looked at through a different lens.
Go ahead. My name is Tero Lachna. I'm from the Electrical Safety Authority, one of the 5 companies that was broken out of Ontario Hydro. So I know what the processes were because I was a PNC engineer, and the training and everything was pretty rigorous. But this is a question for Marisa. One of the things that you commented on was that in licensing the engineer at an industrial facility or manufacturing facility, the safety is an issue. You quoted a number of incidents that happened in the last year or even overall. How do you know, or did you relate the incidents to facilities that have engineers? Not everybody has engineers. They manufacture anything, but they'll hire an engineer to design their system, and they walk, they get paid, and they're gone. Have you related those accidents to actual facilities that have engineers on site that weren't licensed? Will this licensing now help this? And these are questions we're tackled with this on a daily basis, because the Ministry of Labor asks us to participate sometimes in investigations for incidents or accidents that happen, and we need to know or to make us more comfortable knowing that if an engineer is licensed, will it be safer or will it not? Those are the questions that need to be answered. That's how you can push things forward, but using quotes like this without quantifying them causes grief altogether. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I heard a couple of different themes, so I'll try to capture them. The first that I heard is that if engineers are practicing in manufacturing and their conduct results in some sort of an incident, then yes, today PEO gets involved through complaints and discipline process to hold that engineer accountable. If it's a non-engineer, then of course we have enforcement provisions, so it's a different kind of process. But I guess one of the challenges, and this again comes into the interdependence and complexity when you start looking into an issue, is you see the statistics which I shared that we get from the workplace safety associations across Canada that speaks to where there have been injuries in a sector related to equipment and machinery. Then when you delve in deeper, you say, well, help me understand more about the cause of it. What we realize is that not everything is always measured. So, and usually things aren't measured until there's something happens. And we heard that theme again this morning. We do things more so reactive than proactive. So we're in a conundrum where we have indications from other provinces and from some data to say that in a reactive way something needs to be done. But we also, from a proactive perspective, are looking at it differently, and therefore we haven't necessarily measured the data in the way that we're now looking at it. So has data been measured in terms of not having industrial exception? No, because that's not the way that data gets measured. What do we do to have to change that? Maybe an event has to happen to be reactive to that, or can we do it proactively, right? That's one of the dilemmas that we have. But what we do know is that there is definitely linkages in terms of design work and these incidences, and how can this be one of the roles to play to improve it, and going forward, what can we do to better analyze these situations to collect the right data to give us more direction on how to solve this broader problem. So you're bringing attention to, again, learnings of additional complexities when we started to open up this particular issue.
Hi, Susan. Just wanted to ask, I spent at least half of my time, my first 5 years at PEO, on the Bragg file. You spent a lot, 50 stakeholders, a lot of time. I'd hate to think of how many man hours were spent overall on Bragg. And my question sort of relates to, what did we actually accomplish? Did the legislation that was put in place actually accomplish anything that it was supposed to? Has anything changed in the industry? Did we create a safer building environment by going through this legislation? Hate to think that all that time was wasted, but I just want to hear your opinion on that.
It's a good question, and I think, did anything improve? Did anything change? Was there ever any statistical analysis to find that out? And I think that's the point, is, are we actually doing any measurements after the fact to see if change, in fact, did occur? But I think if I were to answer the question more specifically, is what did come out of it is lessons learned. I think what we learned a lot of lessons in terms of who should be in the room, the various levels of government working together, the impact on the business owner. Those were all lessons learned. The thing for me is, again, statistical analysis and moving forward. If we do have something that, as you say, we spent a lot of man hours in that room, and at the end of the day, it's not meeting the three objectives the way anybody intended it to, is it time to just stop, sit down, reflect, and go back and revisit the process? And I think that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, I mean, right from the beginning, I think we invented those three topics for what Bragg was, because Bragg was come out with an idea, get rid of building permit process, and then we had to figure out, first of all, what are we trying to accomplish? Gave a rationale for getting rid of the building regulation process, and then we didn't know that we really had that problem to begin with, because I
Right.
still don't know what problem we actually solved by going through all of that. So I just want, not statistics, but just your opinion on it. If you see anything different in the industry, in the building industry today as there was in 1999.
Frustrated practitioners? Is that a good answer?
Probably good.
I think the common application form, the insurance, I think those are good things. I think, again, as responsible practitioners, everybody wants to do the right thing. They want to demonstrate competency of the code. They want to make sure that they're accountable. Did we need the process to make that happen? I think is where we're at. And I think PEO, through the action that it took, proved the point that sometimes the regulated professionals are the ones who can make the right decision. And I'll end with a plug. In my bio, they talked about the fact that interior designers are looking for regulation. One of our things is, if interior design is not a regulated profession right now, we're working towards it. We're hoping that we have regulation introduced shortly. And if regulated professions such as PEO and OEA can demonstrate that that's where the buck stops, and Marisa's talking a little bit about that now, does it make more sense to just make sure that there are regulated professions to manage the people who are working in these spaces?
So I guess my comments are back to the exclusion clause. It doesn't just relate to manufacturing; it relates to many sectors, including mining. And as I see it, the reason we want to do it is, first of all, to be similar to the rest of the country. We're the only province that has this aberration. Secondly, as far as deciding what the transition strategy should be, or criteria, or whatever, that's what should be at play. The fact that we should get rid of that exclusion clause, I would think our profession should fight this tooth and nail in the public arena everywhere, and it has to be on health and safety. It can't be on engineering principles or any of that stuff. It has to be the person that does design work, that does engineering work in a workplace, and has to be held accountable for the safe design for the workers involved, or for the public might be affected if that nuclear plant goes up, deserves to have a profession, a professional with a profession behind him, holding him accountable for his qualifications. At the root of our profession has to be around safety, has to be around that whole area of health and safety. So I think if you had to extend the amount of time to implement this, I know that when we put the Professional Engineers Act, we grandfathered a number of engineers that might not have gone through the normal process. I know that it was distasteful to some, but it managed to get the profession whole. Maybe we need to give a little bit of time. We might have to look at grandfathering some sort of a process. We might have to have some kind of an interim measure so that the accountability for those people that might not have the full professional status, there's some oversight. I absolutely agree. Your organization is one of the best in terms of oversight, and I wouldn't have any problems with people coming out of your particular organization. But others, there are problems. And being part of the Ministry of Labor, we found a lot of nasty things happening, and we weren't able to address it. Now I think we have the time to address it. I think the profession has to make a big stand on this one. Publicity, whatever it has to take, and I think the strategy has to be worked out of what will we tolerate. Is it a longer period of time to phase this in? But somehow we have to take a stand on this one.
Sure. I'll just quickly comment to that to say that, and again, I'm just reflecting on what I've heard today at this conference, but one of the things I heard this morning is that our profession is not necessarily one that goes and puts signs up, or is very loud about our issues. I guess we're not one that shouts it out. And this is an interesting observation of our profession, because you're saying that you would like to see more of that, and bring some of these things into the more of the public eye. So I think that's interesting what you said. And the other thing around accountability. I mean, the basis of regulation, which we've been talking about for different professions, is to move things out of civil litigation to deal with things and provide the public an avenue for making sure that someone will be accountable for their actions without them having to go and go through the court system. So we have our own responsibility through our professions, and that's really important that the public have that, because they can't take take their dentist to court every time there's a problem. They wouldn't be able to afford that, and so that structure is very important for the public, and it needs to be better understood by various governing bodies. So, anyways, that's all I had to say.
Okay,
Thanks.
so we've allowed this to